The Open Data Initiative was launched in the early phases of the President Obama's administration, primarily to share and expose data to allow additional use by citizens as well as by companies and other federal agencies. Following the Open Government Initiative, the Obama administration also launched the Open Data Initiative, again with a focus primarily on data, again with the idea of having transparency, but more importantly, to share information across a wide spread of valued users. There's some data that we have utility of through a license agreement, and some of those license agreements allow us to, in fact, share that information. But it really depends on how that license has been construed and how it's written. But most data that has been purchased with taxpayers' dollars, the general thrust is that we want to share that information with all of our citizens. For our citizenry to be informed, they need data, and they need information more importantly. And that's another driver behind the sharing of this information, is that we're finding a lot of companies and innovators who are taking that data and developing value-added products that are used to a lot of users. So just a great uptake of this information data in the United States, and we believe that it's going to be an area that's going to continue to grow. Currently, this legislation that's before our Congress to establish the Open Data Act, which will then make machine-readable data will have to be made available to agencies by law. So, and that will codify it, and then we'll see more of an uptake and more of a growth in this space. Well, I think we're still kind of evaluating that, but I do believe we're seeing some economic growth, primarily because of the ability to take that data and repurpose it for other uses, and essentially taking an opportunity to use it in a way that provides value-added products for dealing with different decision-making tools, and also to help folks make better decisions in their everyday lives. One good example is recreation. Having this information available when you're planning a trip to our national parks is very important. At least in my experience, you're starting to see other countries sort of duplicate this policy. So I think it's going to be something that's done by governments. But if they continue to evaluate this process and see how it is really working to inform our citizenry, I think you're going to see more of this. And we've been sort of pushing this for the last 8 years, primarily because of the value that I've already discussed. But you know, as I travel around, I see that more countries are beginning to also see the value in sharing information and sharing the data. So that's going to be the uptakes and the growth opportunities in my viewpoint. I think we need some enhancements. There's so much information, so much data, that I think some of the infrastructures are somewhat overwhelmed. And that's not an issue for us right now in terms of the amount of data. I think the challenge is taking that data and processing it in a way and providing it through a mechanism that's digestible by the everyday citizenry. I think that's where I think the growth opportunities are going to be, and creating and taking that data and creating information from that data to help inform us. I don't think misuse is only associated with open data. I mean, any data can be misused. So it's something that we have to be mindful of, but also cognizant of the fact that there will be some folks who will not, will be using information in inappropriate ways. And I think that's just the nature and the balance that we have, that by exposing the information, it also leaves us somewhat vulnerable in some cases. It depends on how that information is actually used. Really exposing data that we're already collecting. So there is some minimal cost in processing the data to make it usable, but overall this data is being collected through tax dollars for other uses. The value here is that we're leveraging those investments, to repurpose it in a way that can really help inform our citizenry again. And what we're currently doing, we're assisting with identifying data sets that can be used for the indicators for the Sustainable Development Goals. And we believe that there's some capabilities that we have now that can really serve that purpose. But we're in the process now of doing some crosswalking, identifying what available is actually being requested or needed, but also identify where those gaps may be, so we can then begin to take steps to begin to fill those gaps. It's going to be a global effort, and as we get to see how geospatial information is becoming part of our everyday life, I think we're seeing this growth opportunity throughout the globe. And some are more comprehensive than others, of course, but I think by exposing this information, sharing this information, and making it available through the internet, that we're starting to see a huge growth in this, and a number of opportunities to take advantage of this great information and data that's available. Well, it's going to take some communication, and I think we have to have a forum to have these discussions and begin to have some informed discussions about what is available, what's not available, and then the costs associated with that. And that's going to require some planning. And it will be, I think, required to look for additional resources for these gaps. I mean, that's something that we've identified already, but it's going to really require a lot of communications and planning as we look forward and sustaining and supporting Sustainable Development Goals over the next 10 years.